right. Good evening, everybody. Waiting for the little live delay here, but I believe we are live, and it looks like we already have Rick, who's dropped us a comment in the YouTube comments. So, welcome everybody to Walk with History. It's been a little while since we have jumped on, and in a few minutes, we'll have Sarah from the History Chick 1941 over on Instagram jumping in and joining us. So we're going to kind of chit chat for a little bit. We're here to talk about Oppenheimer.
Yes.
We're going to kind of review. We've done this before. We actually did this with the Elvis movie a few months back. And it was like, did incredibly well. It kind of surprised us how well
people are interested in what is fact and what is fiction. And people are interested in what's done for the movies and what actually happened historically. But before we begin, we just wanted to remember today is August 6th. And on August 6th, 1945, 8:15 a.m., little boy was dropped from the Enola Gay onto the city of Hiroshima. And the B-29 Super Fortress was the aircraft that dropped that bomb. And so at the end of this live today, we'll talk more about our next video, which I take a tour of a B-29 Super Fortress and talk about the people who are the crew of that aircraft. But 70,000 people were killed instantly. And one of the things I remember most about the bombing of Hiroshima is Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes.
Yeah, you talk about that book a lot.
And so at the MacArthur Memorial, I read the book as a kid, and any nuclear museum you go to will have a Thousand Paper Crane exhibit, because Sadako was a child of Hiroshima. She was 2 years old when the bomb was dropped, and she dies at 12 years old from the aftermath of the poisoning.
Yeah.
And in Japanese culture, if you fold 1,000 paper cranes origami, you are granted a wish. Now, unfortunately, Sadako paper was scarce at that time, and she was not able to fold 1,000 paper cranes. But the story goes that people eventually folded them all for her, and she's considered a child of hope, much like the girl Anne Frank.
Oh yeah.
So we think of Sadako as the Pacific Anne Frank.
Oh, interesting.
So just something to think about today before we jump into the movie Oppenheimer. I just wanted to do a little moment to remember this event that happened today, 78 years ago.
Yeah, and honestly, we didn't really plan this out as much as you might think, like doing this movie review on the day that the first atomic bomb was dropped during World War II. It actually just kind of all lined up. We had just finished up a Western road trip, about a month and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And we had gone out to Denver to visit some friends and do some history out there. And there was a museum out in Pueblo, which is an hour and a half, 2 hours south of Denver. And they had asked us to come out, the kind of our real first actual sponsored video. So they asked us to come out, do a bunch of filming. We filmed a lot more than we expected.
Yes.
The place was huge. It's a phenomenal air museum.
Phenomenal.
But they had a B-29 that they had been restoring over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both got to kind of climb around, and Jen much more so than I, to climb around inside an actual B-29 bomber, Super Fortress. And so I just finished making that video a couple hours ago. We're going to try to do a preview at the end of the live stream, like Jen said, but we thought that was just kind of perfect timing with the movie, with the 78th anniversary of Hiroshima, and then our video for the museum. So we focused this specific video. We'll have a couple on the B-29.
Yes.
And we kind of worked in some older Hiroshima footage, of Truman and the actual air crew and things like that. So it's a very fun video, but we are going to talk a little bit about Oppenheimer tonight.
So no, we're going to talk a lot about Oppenheimer tonight. Yeah. So the movie. So let's talk about the movie. Now, this is a 3-hour-long movie. Christopher Nolan. So if you're a fan of Christopher Nolan.
I love Christopher Nolan. I'm a huge fan of his movies.
And it's a great cast. I mean, you're going to recognize people in this cast, and even short tidbits.
Yeah,
he's got some famous actors.
They had a lot more A-list actors in this than I expected.
But it's a biographical film about Oppenheimer, and it's based on a biography that was written by him called American Prometheus. So, of course, it opens up with a little tagline about Prometheus. Prometheus is the god who gives fire to humans, and because he does that, he's forever tortured. And it's a great kind of theme.
Yeah, he steals it from the gods. Like
Yeah,
he steals fire from the
and
gods to
gives
give
it
it to the
to
humans.
humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a great kind of theme because you're going to see the torture of the man Oppenheimer, who's tortured internally and externally.
Yeah.
So you're going to see.
And oh, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie,
Yeah, you probably don't watch this.
One, you kind of already know. Everybody knows what's happened. This is a historical movie, but we're gonna drop spoilers all throughout this. So if you have not seen the movie and you don't want spoilers, come back and watch this after you've seen the movie.
Yes.
Just a heads up. Well, we have Sarah on. I believe she's seen it as well.
She has. So we'll be able to talk to someone who's seen it. And if you've seen it and you have questions, you want to say something, please put them in the comments. But it's based off of that book, and it pretty much holds true to the book. It's written by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin. But the book is very chronological because it's a biography of his life. The movie is really going to center back and forth in his life, but on these two big hearings that kind of happened in the 50s.
Yeah, so I wasn't really aware of these. Now, from my perspective, right? Again, I say this all the time. We haven't done a live stream in a while, so I'll just remind folks: I'm not the history buff between the two of us. So growing up and all that stuff, I've kind of come around, right, since we started the channel and everything like that. Really, the things that I remember from the bombings and everything, I always remember the spies that they discovered.
Oh, the Rosenbergs?
The Rosenbergs. For some reason, that's the thing that stuck into my head, like in high school and afterwards
Yes.
and all that stuff. Like all the events kind of leading up to it. I guess I just didn't either latch on to any of that stuff, or I didn't really focus on it as much in high school, but I remember the Rosenbergs afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not know the father of the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer.
I
knew.
if you'd have put a list on there, I might have been able to pick it out, but you probably could have tricked me pretty easily.
Los Alamos, you probably knew.
I would have known Los Alamos.
And what's interesting too is your mom lived in Livermore.
Yep.
And she used to always say, the lab in Livermore, the lab in Livermore. We're like, what are you talking about? Well, that lab in Livermore is what eventually becomes the H-bomb lab.
And Livermore is just outside of San Francisco.
Yeah,
in
so
Central
Berkeley,
California.
the Berkeley area, the same kind of where they all meet and initially start the Manhattan Project. So we're going to have Sarah on in about 3 minutes, but just so we get the setting, what Nolan does is he really has it's Hollywood. He's going to have a protagonist and an antagonist.
Yep.
And, you're going to have your protagonist is Oppenheimer,
Yep.
and your antagonist is Louis Strauss, and it's pronounced Strauss. It looks like Strauss, but it's pronounced Strauss. And basically these two very smart men, very ambitious men, and there's kind of like a feud between the two of them. I would say that Oppenheimer's not quite as aware of how deep the feud is as Strauss
and I would say so. Strauss is definitely the antagonist in kind of the latter half of the movie. I think that the first half of the movie, in my opinion, because this movie's long enough to do this, really, I think the antagonist for him is his own kind of internal struggle with his thoughts on communism. Like just the movement, not the actual kind of Russian or what they call it, the Soviet communism.
Sure, yes.
So there was a lot of the antagonist, I think, in the first part of the movie was really himself and his internal conflict,
his loyalty,
his loyalty,
where does it
and
lie?
his kind of academic. Hey, I'll never say that I'm not interested in what the communists have to say. I'll never say that, right?
Yeah.
Because he's almost a pure academic.
Yes.
But he is loyal to America.
He is.
But he also has some very bad habits that
set him up for some failure.
Set him up for some failure.
So you're going to he has a hearing basically in 1954, the 2 months, April, May of 54, Oppenheimer, where his security clearance has been suspended, and they're having a hearing to evaluate his security clearance, basically. And there's a lot of flashbacks around that, and there's a lot of you're going to get like a very early basis of all these characters who are testifying in this hearing, and then it kind of flashes around Strauss's congressional hearing to be Secretary of Commerce in 1959. So really these two 1950 hearings, and Strauss his whole story is Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
Like,
he plays a political game,
mhm.
and Oppenheimer kind of has all the scientists on his side. So
So it's very
it's
interesting
very interesting. So
that that's kind of the two people who this whole movie is kind of centered around. But we're going to bring Sarah from the History Chick on. She has a really great Instagram, the History Chick 1941. She has seen the movie, and we're going to talk to her. And
yeah, so I believe you guys can see Sarah. Sarah, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you guys.
Great, awesome. We can hear you guys too. And I also want to say hello to Sumo in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
He's an old
Navy
I
friend.
was gonna say Navy friend. He was in the Marine Corps. So
He's a Marine Corps, but
Marine
he's
Corps
a pilot, F-18 pilot.
Yeah, well, you can't tell because it's not on his name there.
I know. Simo's his call sign.
But so Sarah, so you've seen Oppenheimer. Like, what do you think? Like, when did you go see it?
I saw it the day after it came out.
Nice.
I didn't want to go see it the day of. I'm not a big crowd person, so
Yeah.
but it still was pretty busy. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Like 8.59. I flip back and forth between an 8.5 and a full 9, and I don't fully know why, but when I reflect back on the movie, I'm like, oh, it's definitely a 9. Wait, no, it's an 8.5. No, it's not. It's a definite must see anyways. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it was good. I mean, we saw it. I mean, just yesterday.
Yeah.
And the movie theater was still packed. I was actually pretty surprised.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those movies that you go see, the first kind of group went to go see it, and there was just kind of conversation about it afterwards. Like, I mean, I heard about it from friends at work, and they're like, yeah, it's 3 hours, but it's definitely worth seeing. Like, what do you think of it from kind of the historical aspect of it? Was it kind of neat to you to see them kind of recreate all that stuff?
It was a handful of years back. I went on a Manhattan Project rabbit hole, and just kind of a forewarning for people who haven't seen the movie. It's not a movie specifically about the Manhattan Project, which is a lot of people online I've been reading are like, oh, they barely touched, it's not about the Manhattan Project. No, it's about Oppenheimer. So forewarning for that, if you're looking for something on the Manhattan, specifically that, this movie is not going to be that for you. But it was really cool to see because Nolan actually did pretty good at doing a lot of things correctly, and I thought the casting too was pretty spot on as well. I thought Cillian was great as
Me too.
Oppenheimer.
I think he should get definitely a nomination, if not the Oscar. Like, he was amazing. He was amazing.
I completely agree. But yeah, seeing everything, I just the little excerpts, because I knew a little bit about Oppenheimer going in. I knew more about specifically the Manhattan Project versus Oppenheimer. So if you're somebody who doesn't know that much about him, it's definitely a good movie to see, but you definitely want to know who Oppenheimer is before going to go see it. So you want to know he's the father of the atomic bomb, and he worked on the Manhattan Project and everything. You need to know those little tidbits, because if you're somebody who doesn't know any of that and goes into it, I could see you being very confused in a way.
And I was lucky because this one had already started reading up on it. So as we were driving out on date night, I just said, hey, tell me about Oppenheimer. So I got the 10-minute rundown from Jen. So I was ready to go as soon as we got into the theater. But I didn't realize, I was actually kind of surprised, like how famous he was after it was all said and done. I mean, I didn't realize he was on the cover of Time magazine, and he was like really out in the public eye and just internationally known for being the leader of this project.
Yeah. And Sarah, to what you said too, I think, when we think about Oppenheimer, we think about, the face of a scientist, right?
Yeah.
And he really was, I think he took that upon himself to be the face of those scientists, to consider another part of wartime evolution technology. They say that the most advances will happen during wartime for any kind of technology when it comes to warfare or automobiles or aviation. All the advances are leaps and bounds during wartime for money and people who are very motivated and
when you focus the world's efforts or a nation's efforts in one direction, it's it's natural.
Yeah.
It's natural.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted to be the face of that because I think it's another opinion, which I think they really, like you said, this is a movie about him, his internal and external struggles. And I think he wanted to really show there's a different face of people who are really pushing this effort forward, and they have a different point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and also kind of just from the artistic aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
And before we go into that, I want to say hello to a couple people, to Tommy and to Chris Witt from Witt Docs.
Oh, yay.
Seeing them in the chat. So everybody's saying that they're looking forward to seeing it. But from the artistic aspect of it, from kind of just the kind of Christopher Nolan's kind of showing this almost beautiful mind type.
It was like the busy mind, right, Sarah? He couldn't quiet his mind.
He couldn't quiet his mind, and you could just tell the torment in his face of, not so in the beginning of the movie, not so much of the torment, but you can see it as it goes on, how much this project and this development really affects him. And then towards the end, and when they flash back to the hearings, you can see just the total devastation that it had on him emotionally, mentally, because it did completely.
Yeah, I mean, that meeting with Truman is pretty accurate. That meeting with Truman, where he kind of like, he's grieving in a way, and he's kind of saying, I'm to blame, I did this.
And I have blood on my hands.
I have blood on my hands. And Truman is like, what? Why? I need to deal with this, And he just wasn't expecting that from him, right? And of course, he treats him lackluster and kicks him out. But
and one thing that I kind of wanted to look up that we just didn't get around to, right? I was making the next video all day, but was I didn't. There's tons of things that I learned watching this movie, of course, for me, but. I didn't realize that he and his students were kind of one of the ones that kind of first published, I assume, kind of theories about black holes.
Yeah, so
is that true?
That is true. And it was true that it actually, the paper he wrote broke on the day that Germany invaded Poland. That's true. But you have to see Oppenheimer, and I think they do a good job of this, really didn't care. Like, so he was more concerned with the science. He's like, a black hole is a star that implodes in itself, and the gravity is pulling it, and it pulls the light. And isn't that amazing that it's pulling light?
Yeah.
And it creates a black hole? But okay, who cares? We're moving on to something else. And so when somebody picks up this work and really dives into black holes, and that's a big part of physics later, right? In 70s, 80s.
Well, and
they give him a little ode, but he probably could have done all of that too. He just kind of,
I think he just thought it was fascinating. He's like, it's super fascinating. Like this is black holes and all that stuff. All right, next project, type of thing. It's just like.
And I think they mentioned a couple times, one of the things that he both wasn't good at and wasn't interested in was the mathematics. He liked the theory, and it seemed like Christopher Nolan kind of took that and interpolated that into why he was kind of like a better leader, because he wasn't interested or as good at the mathematics side of things, kind of like really in the weeds type stuff. He was the theorist, which, as you elevate in leadership positions, you can't be the subject matter expert in really any one thing. You kind of have to be good at all the stuff, more of a theorist. So I think I noticed that, right, as someone in the military, right, and in leadership positions, being kind of forced into that higher level. You can't be a subject matter in everything. So he kind of naturally fit in that role because they gathered this team. And that was really interesting too, seeing all the different scientists from all the walks of life, bringing them in from everywhere to kind of work on the different projects.
Yeah, that was neat. And, another thing that was neat too is because when you bring all those people in, you bring all those opinions in. Right. And
they're vastly different.
And these are scientists, right?
Yeah.
So scientists have different points of view, and they have different motivations. And they don't really brush on this in the movie, but I told Scott, Oppenheimer is not a poor dude, right? Yeah. His dad leaves him $8 million, right? They have original Van Goghs in their house. And we just did the Van Gogh experience this weekend, right? Van Gogh is one of the most expensive paintings ever sold at auction, right? So he is, again, and I think they kind of allude to this when Lawrence kind of yells at him in the lab, like, how much do you make, to the one guy? You know, because they're talking about socialism and unionizing. What are you unionizing for? You're making more than anybody else here at this college, you know? And so they don't really allude to this, but, and they make it seem like Oppenheimer's like a broken man at the end, like he has no job. But I'm like, he's fine.
Yeah, he's
you know,
doing
she's
okay.
He's well off.
He's well. She's like, we're gonna lose our house. I'm like, you're fine.
Not gonna happen.
So Sarah, like, I mean, what in general, like, if you were going to tell someone about the movie, right, you know, from someone that's not a history, you know, geek like the rest of us, you know, that make history content, like, what would you tell them? Be like, hey, this movie's great because of, you know, whatever reason.
I think it's great because I think it shows the in-depth. Everybody knows about the atomic bomb. Obviously, you know, was a huge part of ending World War II.
Yes.
But seeing the person behind it and seeing that it just wasn't some scientist who whipped this together, and that this was the plan for Oppenheimer, you know, of using the atomic bomb to end World War II. But it's a in-depth biography about the trials and tribulations and the impact of such an amazing scientist. And it shows and it shows leading up to the atomic bomb, and then the fallout and the aftermath of this brilliant man and the emotional turmoil he went through.
Yeah.
The one thing that I was curious was, and again, I assume if there's a book kind of written about it, I don't believe it would be a historical fiction that this book was. It was probably some sort of biography.
It's biography, yeah.
Biography. But they really did kind of make, and I don't know if this is more in the movie and if it was the same way in the book, but they make Strauss out to be like an intentionally kind of bad guy in the end, right? And it, like, again, it's a movie.
It's a movie.
But and then Oppenheimer really was, he kind of played the martyr.
Yeah, and they I mean, it's a movie, so they and so there's some things in the movie that aren't accurate, right? So when is it Hill who gives the final testimony?
Yeah.
Well, Hill's not the only person who's saying this. Right? He's not the only scientist. Yeah, he's not coming in like, here, you know, everyone's wrong. Strauss has been after Oppenheimer, and he's been doing this. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, really? He's not. There was a lot of scientists that came in and said that.
Okay.
There's a lot of scientists that said there's a personal vindictiveness between Strauss and Oppenheimer, and it's been going on for years. Many scientists said that. They just used Hill's testimony in the movie. And it really wasn't the scientists that stopped Strauss from getting the nomination. It actually was a very personal feud between the New Mexico Senator Clinton Anderson. He hated Strauss. They hated each other. They had been fighting for years, and he he's the one who got all the votes and got the people. Now it is true that Kennedy and Johnson didn't vote for Strauss nomination when they expected him to, and they were young senators, so they expected those two to kind of go, and they kind of were swayed by the testimony more so. But it was that senator from New Mexico that really had made sure he wasn't going to get the nomination. So what I saw from that is that Strauss is a feud guy. Right? Like, Strauss has these issues with not just, but he has these issues with other people as well.
Yeah, interesting.
And so, and when you think about it, Oppenheimer's not even a part of that testimony. It's just people who are testifying about the whole situation. But yeah, I love how a movie makes it like it's one person who comes in, and it's my one testimony.
And
it brought it to light.
Usually in movies, what we see is we kind of see one character who really symbolizes, like you said, 10, 20, you know, half a dozen, whatever it is, different people, right? Like you said. So, Jen, question for you, and Sarah, maybe you can answer this too, but as far as Los Alamos goes, was that kind of portrayal of what the city was built up like? Do you guys know if that was relatively accurate to real life?
I'll let Sarah answer first. I know some, yes
I
and
know
no.
some of the documentaries that I've seen, yes, but we also do need to remember that it is a movie, so
Right.
things are going to play out differently. But they did a decent job, but I don't think that's fully how it came about, if I can remember correctly.
Yeah. When he says, "Is there anyone else around here?" and he goes, "Oh, it's just they use this land for
Yeah,
burials and
nothing for 40 miles.
nothing." For,
Mhm.
That's not true. There
Yeah.
were little communities around there,
Oh, really?
and actually, people who were living in those communities actually would get cancer 20, 30 years later.
No way.
Yes, and they called them the downwinders. So
Oh,
these small communities in the area of Los Alamos that
Yeah.
were there, people who live there, right?
mhm.
And they would end up getting cancer later on in life.
Oh, wow.
So they don't talk about that at all.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
It's like no one's out here. It's just an old boys' school, and the American Indians use it for burial. And I'm like, oh, they don't even mention the downwinders.
But it was based. It was like an area where the Oppenheimers like had a ranch.
Yeah, he liked that area. We had talked about this. Remember, he had tuberculosis younger, and they had bought a ranch out there for the dry air for his lungs, and he liked that area out there. But and they make it a good point of it in the movie. And Sarah, you can confirm this. It was a very good crossroads from the Tennessee area where they were working to the Chicago area to the California. It was a great place to kind of bring all those minds together.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I mean, again, I'm just more curious than anything else.
But it is true that they put a church there and a school there and a hospital there because he did know that scientists were only going to, and this
Bringing
was going to be a
families in.
long-term thing, and they had to bring the families in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild to me. And they mentioned it a couple times. It was, what is it, like 2 or 3 years and $2 billion, and that's in the 40s.
In the 40s.
$2 billion in the 40s. I can't even.
That's a lot.
That's $1 trillion today.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Right.
I know.
Lump a couple aircraft carriers together.
And, Scott and I talked about this too. They always make military people seem like big idiots all the time.
I mean, I didn't think that Matt Damon's character played the idiot. He actually he kind of caught him. He caught him later. He's kind of saying Oppenheimer kind of called him out a little bit later,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, you play the military man, but I know you studied engineering, and I know you're smart, and I know you have a strategy, So Matt Damon's character kind of alluded to that and just kind of but downplayed it because he wanted to let the scientists think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm biased because I'm a military officer. But,
I am always like, why do they make us seem like we're these big bullies? And we're like, oh, well, I don't know what's happening, but you're going to do it. And you're going to, and I'm like, no. And what I think people, Christopher Nolan did this, and and he's done this in a couple movies, is this big divide between science and military.
Mhm.
The military people don't listen to science or push back against science, and that's so not true. There's so many scientists in the military,
Yeah.
and we really
Well-
pay attention to it.
Well, Groves, Matt Damon's character, he's a military man, but he's really, really smart. He had been in engineering since 1918. He's a very, very, very smart man and loves to spend money. But it was so funny. I had somebody tell me that they're like, I think John Goodman would have been a better Groves than Matt Damon.
Ooh,
And I thought about
he would have been good.
I think Matt Damon did a great job at Groves. John Goodman would be really great at playing a character like Groves,
Yeah,
but I don't think specifically Groves.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
just my
I
opinion.
like the cast was amazing and surprising, right?
Oh my
spoiler
gosh.
alert, Gary Oldman as Truman.
It's
I
Truman.
Was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's Gary Oldman. And
Well, I
he's
mean,
great.
Yeah, well, you have all these A-list actors, and you have actors, big actors who just had cameos and didn't even have speaking roles.
Mhm.
You have Matthew Modine, Casey Affleck,
Yeah.
Rami
Mhm.
Malek,
Yeah.
James Reamer, Scott Grimes. There are just so many people that
Yes.
were in that movie, and you're just like, oh, that's what's that?
Yeah.
It was just
Well,
insane.
and there was a lot of actors that it took me a good 5 to 15 minutes to place them because his close friend from New York,
Mhm.
I don't know the actor's name, but I only know him as the head elf in Santa Claus, the movie. He's Bernard.
Oh,
Because he's older.
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
He's put on a fair amount of
He's
weight.
put on yeah.
But I finally recognized it in my head. I was like, "That's Bernard the
Bernard
elf
from the
from
Santa.
Santa Claus." We've got kids, so we watch that all the time.
I watch it every Christmas, and I'm a grown adult. It's a tradition.
That's one of the good ones.
Yeah, his name is on the. I can see his name, but I can't.
Yeah,
but
for some reason, cannot think of it.
There was,
he was great.
and he was fantastic. I was,
And I feel like I hadn't seen Josh Hartnett in a movie in a while, and he played Lawrence.
What was so weird is that I've watched the trailer so many times, and when Josh Hartnett popped up on screen, I went. Like, I had no idea he was in the movie for some reason. I was like, I've watched the trailer so many times. Was he in the trailer? I don't remember.
Yeah, well,
he did a great job, though.
He was
He
fantastic.
did a great job.
He was fantastic.
He was great. I mean, even he seems like he filled out. And
He did.
not in a bad way,
Yeah.
but he just looked like a grown man for some weird way.
Yeah.
But even Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
I took me 5 minutes. I was like, is that because I didn't see I saw the trailer maybe once. And I wasn't expecting him to be in it. So I was very pleasantly surprised by the acting. The acting in this movie was absolutely phenomenal. And I actually did like it was a little loud.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So they play with sound a lot.
They play with sound a
is
lot.
another
Yes.
thing that he really uses sound, I think, to also show the busyness of the mind and kind of like the focus of where your mind is sometimes. It's another sense that he really plays on. There was so many instances where it was so loud. I mean, of course, they're emphasizing a explosion, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, that is loud. It was. You definitely know that he was using that sense to, in the movie. Like he wanted to really play on that.
Yeah, and even just in some of the just like the non-nuclear explosion scenes, right? Even just when they're walking down the hallway, they again from someone who dabbles with tiny little YouTube videos, not like a Christopher Nolan movie, but Christopher Nolan does it a lot in his movies with different sound and not just in the dialogue or in the main explosion. But they're walking down the hallway, you can hear all the movements a little bit more. You can hear a lot more of that stuff. I felt like in a different way, it pulled you in a little bit more, which was different, right? It wasn't quite as muted and dialogue focused. They weren't afraid to kind of let all those extra sounds in. Very kind of random little notice. Not a lot of people might notice that. But I actually
it adds a lot more
kinda like
depth
that.
it adds a lot more depth to the scene and emotion and feelings. People don't realize how much music has that connection that music can do that, and
Yes.
The soundtrack is just the music in it and everything is brilliant. He just does good soundtracks. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's raising all the senses. Like I even watched the explosion scenes and to create those kind of and to film them, right? I was just looking at the fireballs and how amazing and, graphic they were. I was like, how did he film this? Like, what did he do? What did he actually explode to do this? Like they really were beautiful. Like it was captivating.
Now, Jen, one of the things you said that you had read up on was basically his mistresses, for lack of a better word, because for
He's so
like a
bad.
skinny little nerdy scientist, the guy could
A ladies'
pull
man.
some tail.
He was a ladies' man.
Oh my lord!
I mean, I don't think the women were quite as attractive as Florence Pugh. I
Sure.
mean, let's not beat around. She's gorgeous, right? But yeah, he did have affairs, and and I was, and even to the point like his wife understood. I wouldn't say understood. There was an understanding that he was having these affairs, and even how they met was through an affair, right?
Yeah.
So
That's right. Yeah.
and I don't know, like they don't go quite into depth about the death of his first mistress. What was her last name? Tadlock. But they allude to it a little bit that was it a suicide? Was it not a suicide? Because they found the pills in her system and she's drowned. And She drowned, and a doctor had said if that was the way to kill somebody, that's the best way to do it, to make it look like a suicide. And she didn't sign the suicide note, so was it just something someone had grabbed and pulled? So was it because she knew too much, and he had seen her while he was working on the Manhattan Project, and he was being followed the entire time, so they knew they were together. So they brushed on it just a little bit in the movie, but I think it also alludes to this silencing of the mind, the distraction, like this is how he kind of gets some kind of respite from his mind, is through women, and so, and they barely touch on the affair at the end that he's been having pretty much the whole entire time with the other woman as well. So yeah, it's very interesting, but he will stay married to his wife until his death. And his wife will actually be the one to take his urn and drop it in the ocean within view of their beach house in Virginia and on the Virgin Islands. But so I feel I understood her saying to now it's going to be published, because this is again the 1950s where I'm not going to say there is some understanding that men are having affairs, high profile men. I mean, you think of Kennedy, right? Like you think but when she said now it's going to be published, it's now it has to be publicly acknowledged.
It was like in the public record.
And that's embarrassing for me, right? Now I'm embarrassed, right? And so that was very much I think a politics of the 50s when she talks about that. But yeah, I mean, it's Christopher Nolan. And again, I think he does a very good job of like when he's talking about the affair during the investigation committee and he's sitting there naked talking about it.
I know. Just awkward.
Just how open and bare it is, and how vulnerable it is to have to admit that and talk about that.
So because I have two people that are much smarter in history than I am here chatting with me, what's one other thing that at least each of you guys may know that they got wrong in the movie? Because that's usually some of the interesting things, right? It seems like to me Christopher Nolan actually did a pretty good job staying true to historically accurate, for the most part, minus some Hollywood liberties required of not making it a 6-hour movie. But he's basing it off the book. It sounds to me like for the most part, there's only a couple little things that were off in the movie. So I'm not sure that it sounds like there's too much that they actually got wrong when it comes to historical.
I'll let Sarah go first if she's.
I think, and I should have looked this up before I came on, but this is just something that I remember from the top of my head from years ago. His connection with Albert Einstein, because they were, they were friends, but I don't think he confided in him the way that he did. And I think that they actually met later than the timeline he did in the movie, but I could be wrong on that. But I think that is wrong. But I think if I am correct, if I remember correctly, I think he did it to, add to the movie. But I think that he met Einstein later, and I don't think that he confided in, because I don't. Why would he confide in something like that with Einstein? I think so. That's what I can think 100%, I remember.
I can 100% see them kind of taking that and making it fit for the movie.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's an easy, person that everybody knows.
It's a good
someone to kind of be able, the average person watching this movie be able to latch on to, oh, that's Albert Einstein. Okay, I'm more comfortable in this scene, or, knowing that this person is part, knowing this Oppenheimer person a little bit better.
Yeah,
so I can see that.
That's 100% true, Sarah. And I think, like you said, they make again, it's like an amalgamation. He does talk to other scientists like Einstein, but they kind of make it Einstein. And although he does talk to Einstein, like you said, later in life, it's not to this point that he's confiding in him, where you look at these equations for me, where you check these equations
Am I gonna
for
blow
me,
up the world?
right? And what I remember about their relationship, it was very much kind of the same Oppenheimer as he gets older too. It's the younger generation. Like Einstein kind of looked at him as like the younger generation, right? And that's kind of how, they had met with that kind of understanding, that mentor mentee, appreciation understanding, not so much.
Oh, not so
Yeah.
much as equals.
Yeah, like give me
Yeah.
some
Oh, interesting.
advice. But there's two things that I know that they kind of embellished in the movie. That storm, before they dropped. Like there was a
Oh, like the
storm.
night of the
Yeah, but it
testing.
Yeah.
wasn't like all night storm. It delayed them 90 minutes.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
they knew it was going to clear up. Even the meteorologist is like,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's going to clear up. This happens all the
Mhm.
time, right?" And so no one was really worried about the storm.
Yeah.
So that was like one thing. And the apple. So I had told Scott, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
apple, it never got to the point where someone was about to bite the apple, and he like
Dramatic
throws
effects. But he did
He
poison
did.
he did
Yes.
poison his
Teacher's
professor's
apple.
apple. Yeah. Mhm.
But he gets caught in real life. And I think he confesses beforehand. And he gets in trouble. His parents intercede and allow him to stay at the school, but he has to go for counseling.
Mhm.
So that's when he gets like his first like psychiatric counseling and stuff. But I loved how Bronnan's just about to bite it and he like smacks it out of his hand. It's like, okay, that's a little
dramatic effects. Yeah.
yeah. Now that hearing that happened with Oppenheimer, that was published right away. Like that happens in April, May of 1954. They publish it in June
Oh, wow.
of 54. Now they redact a ton of it,
Sure.
but that's where I think a lot, like even at the end when his wife like keeps her arms crossed and stuff, like everyone knows what everyone has said in that testimony. And I think it was like 2015 or 14 they allowed the full unredacted interview to come out. But one thing that Christopher Nolan did really well is a lot of these meetings, like the meeting where they pick the two cities for Japan, that's almost verbatim
Really?
what happened in that meeting, except for the end where the guy was
Interesting.
like, "Oh, I'm taking this off the list because I honeymooned there."
Yeah.
He actually,
Oh yeah, that
yeah, he made that up. But he
Yeah.
did that. He said he did that to see, so people could see some more humanity among the people in the room, that they're not just playing parts,
Right.
like, but a lot, like even they have so much of this good testimony, right? They have it all there for them that they
Sure.
actually used a lot of the real testimony. Like when he talks about the radioisotopes and how, I don't care about radioisotopes. I can use beer for atomic bombs.
Yeah,
I
when
can
he's
use shovels.
Mhm.
discrediting
Yeah.
Strauss.
Like that's like, again, those are real lines from the testimony.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
I didn't think about that piece of it, that so much of this was recorded,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I guess now probably basically public record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
It was super cool. Like I said, I think he should get the Oscar. I mean, we'll see what else is out there this year.
Yeah.
But I thought he did such a good job.
I did
playing
too. What
him.
did you think of the Trinity test scene?
Oh, when they actually like fire the bomb.
So what I commented to Jen afterwards was, it's such a testament to the amazing talent of directors like Christopher Nolan, who can put tension into a scene where exactly what's going to happen. We all know they tested it in New Mexico, that it went off basically fine, and all this stuff. And then for the movie itself, through the use of filmmaking techniques and the audio and the music and all this stuff, that was probably one of my most memorable parts of the movie, because it was so dramatic, and that contrast of them dropping the bomb with the lead up of tension in the storm, and then the music with the violins,
and everyone getting ready for it.
everyone getting
Yeah.
ready
Right,
for
on
it,
the
all
mattresses
the characters. I mean,
and the
what
glass.
stood out to you in that scene?
I don't know why. I really, really like that scene because of the way that the build up, like you were talking about, but just seeing how how they actually did the Trinity test. And I think it was pretty on point of how they did that. And you think that if these guys are just sitting with goggles on mattresses in the open, air.
Sunscreen on.
What's his name is sitting in his car behind a windshield with nothing on, and you're like, and back then they don't know the effects of radiation or any of that stuff. So, they're like, sure, we can be out in the open on mattresses, or I can just watch it with no goggles through my windshield, my magnified windshield. But just the whole leading up to it, and then the moment the bomb goes off, and then you have that
Silence.
moment, the silence,
Yes.
because it's going to take a while for
Mhm.
everything to blow back. It's not instant, like, you know, some
Yeah.
people think. And like, it was just such a tense scene for,
I loved
I don't
it.
know. I really loved it. It was one of my favorite scenes, I think.
Well, I remember looking at, on the ride home, I said to you, did you see all that old equipment, right? Like the countdown, Sarah, on that old counter, and they're using the voltmeter for the like, and all the old, like, I'm thinking like the technology of the 1940s, like what they used to build this thing. It's just amazing to me.
Isn't that,
right?
it is.
Like,
Yeah.
because nowadays you can look at all that stuff because all that stuff has been mothballed. It's all so archaic now, right? But like that's like the top of the line technology for them back then, and it was just that just blew me away. Looking at those old, all those old computers and count and everything, I was like, wow.
And you think about what we have now
I know.
versus back then, you're like, it's
It's amazing,
crazy.
Yeah, was the and again, maybe this was just a movie making kind of trick, but the kind of code phrase he had with his wife,
yes,
for you know, to take in the sheets.
I don't know, Sarah, was that?
Do you know if that was true? So, if you haven't, for those watching, if you haven't seen the movie yet, or if you didn't catch that, right? He told his wife, he's like, okay, you know, today's going to be the day, or she kind of
she
figured it out. She was like, he told her, he's like, you know, you can take in the sheets, right? If all goes well, you can take in the sheets.
Yep.
And so then, you know, he's probably gone for the rest of the day, or, you know, 2 days, or however long it takes him. And then the bomb test goes successfully, and he calls and he says, you can take in the sheets. And so that's her sign
and she's
that
all
she
happy.
knows that it was successful.
Yeah.
And then he uses it again later.
Yes.
You know, when he finds
says,
out his...
Don't take in the sheets.
When he says, don't take in the sheets, you know, when he finds out that his security clearance was revoked. So I wonder if that was something that they actually used, or if that was just something for the movie.
I wouldn't be surprised because, I mean, we all kind of use our little code thing.
Sure.
Because we know, you know, sometimes you're being recorded. So you have your little, like, even my kids know their password to be picked up from school, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if they had something worked out. But I don't know for sure if that's what they said to each other.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised.
And then, do you guys know when it looked like they were awarded either like the Presidential Medal of Freedom or something like that, Congressional Medal of Freedom later on in life? It looked like it was all the scientists from the Manhattan Project. I assume that actually that did happen in real life.
It did. It did.
Kind of brought them all back together and kind of awarded them that.
Yeah, I mean, he dies in 1967.
Okay.
So I would assume this is in the 60s.
Yeah, probably early 60s.
And it's probably Johnson, more than likely, who's giving it to him. I mean, because Kennedy's killed in 63.
Sure.
So I would think it's probably Johnson.
Yeah.
And yeah, that did happen. And I mean, Sarah, you know, you used to do costumes and hair. Like, his wife looks exactly like Elizabeth Blunt looks exactly like his wife did. Emily Blunt looks exactly like his wife did in the pictures.
They did a really good job on wardrobe, on makeup, on hair. They did a really good job on all of that.
Yeah, there we go. And we got a comment from Stephen Hood in the chat that said, so they got awarded those medals shortly after Kennedy died. Just after JFK was killed, Kennedy, it looks like Kennedy wanted to give it to him, but Johnson eventually had to do it. So thank you for kind of filling us in there, Stephen, on that fact, because I was curious about that. I'm sure that actually happened. I just didn't know kind of what the timeline was.
Yeah, no, and his hat, like all the attention to detail, right? His hat, the way he wore his hat, he always had a cigarette in his hand. Right, like I wonder, did Murphy smoke this whole movie?
And even when I was getting kind of that, you know, I joked that you kind of gave me the 10-minute brief on who Oppenheimer was as we were driving to the movie. You mentioned a couple of things that they kept alluding to in the movie: that he was smoking all the time, that he was skinny because he often forgot to eat. And so his friend kept offering him the orange slices. He's like, "You need to eat," right? So his friend knew, like, he would often forget to eat. So all that stuff that I was very happy that you gave me the 10-minute rundown before we went, because it helped. I was like, okay, they are kind of keeping this basically, true character to form.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I wonder why Strauss is black and white. I mean, there's a lot of play with color during it as well, right? There
Yeah,
was
I
like,
mean that's kind of a semi-classic filmmaker way to kind of differentiate the timelines.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
You
maybe,
know,
yeah.
I've noticed that in Christopher Nolan films or other films I like that are similar to that.
Yeah, he's a big Christopher Nolan fan.
Yeah, I like a lot of his stuff, but so that's an easy way for the director to kind of again kind of differentiate between when they're flashing back and forth
Yeah.
so quickly, right? And when you're flashing back maybe only 10 years, the character in real life isn't going to look that different,
Sure,
right? So it's a little bit easier in a filmmaking sense
sure.
for them to break that up so that you as the audience member when you're watching you actually know like okay this is a flashback, okay now we're back in the trial, or you know or whatever that is. I'm pretty sure that's probably the primary reason that they
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah. I did appreciate too. We talked about this in the car on the way home. The way they kind of separate communism from like pre-war communism, post-war communism, how it was a different kind of mindset. It was a different kind of
Well,
movement.
there was the
you know?
American what they say like the Communist Party, but then
Yeah.
they also said it wasn't really a trial, it was a hearing or whatever.
Yeah.
They differentiated between kind of the Communist Party that was in America before the war and then what they called Soviet communism.
Yeah.
Right. So they kind of even delineated between the two. And I had never really thought about that too much, but it makes sense that even back then there
Yeah.
was a difference between those two.
Yes, for sure.
So-
And I think that was important because I don't think a lot of people really think about that when they learn about communism. Most people just think about Soviet communism.
Soviet communism.
And so it's interesting. Before that happened, there was a big communist movement in America. You know, people were. It was really was like a union kind of thing, and
social equality type
social equality kind of thing, and it had a different. It was a whole different kind of mindset.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, like you said, 8.5 to 9.
Nine,
Why
yeah.
does it keep losing the 0.5? What's the
I don't know
0.5?
because I keep going back and I'm like, there's something about the. Well, first of all, if you're somebody like me who has the bladder the size of a pea, don't get a Coke, don't get a Coke
Yeah.
Zero,
No.
and when you're there because it's a 3-hour movie. I think it keeps losing the 0.5 for me because I think I can't say which specific parts, but I think it could have been a little bit less time. I think he focused a little bit too much on certain scenes where it drug it on a little too long, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
There's a couple parts I felt that.
I'm like, you could have cut that like a minute ago and everybody would understand, you know, what was going on. But but again, right now it's talking, I'm like a 9.
Sure.
But then I'll go reflect and I'm like, what is bothering me? Now it's an 8.5.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still highly recommend it no matter what. It's really good.
Yeah, and honestly, I looked up like what can you visit at Los Alamos? Like I was like, what can you visit if we can go out there? What
Sure.
can you see? So you can go there. They have a visitor center, and you can see a couple of the testing sites. You can't go to any of where they built it, or because it's still in use today. Right. And you can't go to where like the school was or the hospital was and stuff, but you can go to, you can get a bus tour. So you have to go through there, like National Park, and you can get a bus tour to 3 of the testing sites that were used during the Manhattan Project. But you can't, that's the extent of what you can see at Los Alamos.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, Sarah, I'm gonna preview a few minutes of our next video because
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
short notice. And
Yeah, it was
great,
short
and
notice.
I know.
I reached out to
I
a
know,
few
you
folks.
guys too.
We're really happy that you were able to jump on. It's been a while since we've chatted. So
I know.
thank you so much. And for anybody watching, Sarah, the History Chick 1941, she's pretty active on Instagram. I don't know if you're doing too much on YouTube, but I know you've been kind of picking up some more steam on Instagram.
So I'm on Instagram. I'm starting to do History Behind the Page again, which is my live YouTube series, starting that next week.
Awesome.
Next Tuesday we have
Cool.
It'll be very exciting. I'll post that soon, and then it'll go on YouTube. But my main hub is Instagram.
Cool. Yeah. Well, if anybody's watching, look Sarah up on Instagram, and we're
Yeah,
pretty
she has
active.
some great interviews on there.
Yeah, she's got some really fun interviews. So Sarah, I'm gonna take you off the live stream, but thanks for joining us, and
Thanks,
we'll
guys, so much.
yeah, we'll chat again soon.
All right.
All right. So yeah, Steven. So he's saying in Albuquerque, outside of Kirtland Air Force Base, National Museum of Nuclear Weapons, and another place to look and see a lot about it.
That's
Okay.
cool.
Yeah. No, that's
Good,
that's
great
good to know.
recommendation.
That's a good recommendation. So, well, I'm gonna preview if it's okay with those in the chat, if it's okay with you, Jen. A
Yes.
few minutes of our video that's going live on Wednesday.
Yes, because it's a B-29 that I happened to get a personal tour of in the Pueblo Air Museum in Colorado. And we're just going to preview a little bit of it. But because today is the anniversary of the Enola Gay flight that dropped a little boy over Hiroshima, we're going to just preview a bit of this video because this is the same type of aircraft. But
right.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So we're gonna preview a little bit. I picked a particular clip where we're inside of the cockpit, so you guys can actually see what it looks like inside of a B-29 Super Fortress. So again, this is one that's kind of in the restoration phases, and I'm gonna play a little bit of this for you all.
During takeoff and landing. His combat position, of course, is in a...
Oh, give me 1 second here. I need to learn how to get this playing through.
Checklist. Everything is checklist in the military.
Let us know if you guys can hear it in the chat.
Oh, still no sound. That's me in the cockpit. That's in the bombardier seat. I lifted up the back seat and I got to sit in there. I talked about how the bombardier would just be shooting the shit with the two pilots sitting beside him because it would be 14-hour flights. And I got to see exactly what like the bombardier would see.
And the footage that Jen got is just, I think it's unparalleled as far as just kind of a first person view of what you would see sitting in the cockpit. All right, so now we've got someone saying Lima Charlie, so they can hear it loud and clear. So you're hearing the music. We'll kind of narrate it still a little bit. But all these instruments, I mean, this is stuff that they were doing. That was actually something that I hadn't heard.
Yeah, different wing design.
In the audio for Jen, she's actually talking about all the math you would have to do, the calculations and everything. I didn't include it in the video. So this video is actually an Army video.
And that's the actual turret. That's what he's showing.
And he rebuilt this whole thing himself. This whole turret he rebuilt himself. He talks about how he bought that actually off of someone on eBay.
Yeah.
And had to just rebuild it himself. He rebuilt the whole thing. He says he argued with himself for about a decade before actually doing it.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
And this is a shot, I think, back towards the aft end.
Yeah, where the tail gunner would be.
Tail gunner would be.
I couldn't get back there, but that is where the tail gunner would be. So as you can see, they're in the process of restoring this aircraft, but it's pretty amazing. They have it there in the hangar, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, she got about as far back as she could. So I've got a quick shot of her back in the tail end of the B-29.
Yeah, so
So that is our video there.
we hope you enjoy that. That'll be out on Wednesday.
That'll come out on Wednesday. So if you like the rest of it, that's kind of a couple minutes right near the middle of the video, the middle back end. No sound now. Could hear the checklist comment and music before. Okay.
Oh, bummer. Well, we'll make sure the sound is awesome, but it's the visuals of the aircraft that is really cool.
Yeah.
And Wednesday, it'll all drop on Walking Wednesday at 4:00, Eastern
so
time.
It'll come out on Wednesday. And thanks everybody for
Thank
kind of
you for
joining us in
joining
the
us.
chat. We haven't live streamed in quite some time.
Yes.
But reviewing Oppenheimer, we're going to try to do some more of these history videos, kind of a little more loose like this. So if there's another kind of history video that you guys are interested in, maybe us reviewing
Or a movie.
or anything like that, drop us a comment. Put a comment in, and we'll see it. And maybe we'll kind of watch it together whenever we have time, and we'll do another live stream like this. This is fun.
This was fun. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of the Walk with History community. We really appreciate you.
Yeah,
all.
we really do enjoy doing these live streams. It's hard for us to set up because I gotta tear this setup down and build it all back up every single time we do this. And we also have to stay up a little bit later than I normally do, but it's super fun, and this is kind of the best way for us to interact with you guys. So thank you so much again for joining us, and for all the comments we get from you guys and all the watches, all the support. It really is the best part of doing this channel.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.